Hello and welcome to the Startups of London podcast. I'm your host Ozan and the founder of Startups of London. Today, I'm joined by Sid Bavea, founder and CEO of Humanry is a marketplace actually for men's self-care and grooming brands. I've been checking the website before our chat. I like it. It looks very professional. There are a lot of interesting things. And as a man myself, I was tempted to maybe make a few purchases, I must admit. So welcome, Sid.
Thanks, Ozan. Really nice to be with you today. Thanks for having me.
Is this your first startup? How did you decide to launch this business?
It's a great question. Yes, it is my first venture as a founder. Although I have been working for startups now for over 10 years, my first experience was at the startup back then called Viagogo, which was a fraction of the size it is today. So I've been in startups, or I'd say rather more, early stage tech businesses for a while. And that too, marketplaces. So I've been at Viagogo and then Just Eat each 5 years. This is not my first marketplace venture, but definitely my first as a founder.
You're lucky in a way, or this is a very good signal, I must say, from looking from outside, because you have expertise of how a marketplace business, how a platform business works. And I think that should play a lot into how you think about this business, does it?
Yeah, I think it's definitely one of the reasons why I felt comfortable actually going out as a founder, because I'm sure you know, Azan, from speaking to many of them, founding a business is probably one of the hardest things anyone does in their professional life. And being able to found a business in an area where you have prior experience, have seen the kind of mistakes that can be made and can be avoided is definitely helpful. Although I will say that each industry has its own nuances. So I've been in live entertainment tickets and then food and restaurants, and I'm a relatively newcomer to the world of beauty and personal care products. So every industry has its own nuances, but the underlying dynamics of a marketplace, what makes a marketplace successful, the mistakes to avoid, for sure, actually are highly transferable across industries. And I'm already noticing that this is my third time noticing how it's actually, there's some common dynamics. And if you stay true to the foundations, it can lead to good out from the business model.
What are those foundations, if you would indulge us for a minute? Because platform businesses are actually everywhere when you think about it. I remember reading a book about it, I think 4 years ago. Platform Revolution, I think was the name of the book. And since then, platforms are everywhere. So what are some certain dynamics that are in common across these type of two-sided marketplace platform businesses that you kind of mentally go to?
Of course, yeah. So the first one that people commonly talk about is the unlocking of network effects, which is in very simple terms, and obviously in a marketplace or in a platform, there are two sides. There is typically the merchant or the vendor, and then there's the customer or the buyer. And the network effects get unlocked as more and more merchants or vendors join the marketplace, more and more customers find that marketplace useful. As more customers come, then more vendors want to join because they know that marketplace has a lot of customers that might be incremental to their business and their brand. And so the most foundational dynamic is the network effect. As both sides of the marketplace get bigger and bigger, the more valuable it becomes to both of those stakeholders, the buyer and the seller. And it's quite frankly the same even at Humanary today, as we've added more and more incredible brands to our platform. The more customers have found us useful, in fact, the more we've been able to add value to both sides of the equation, the buyer and the seller.
So let's talk about Humanry itself, and how do I pronounce it right? What is the way that you?
Yeah, you said it right. It's Humanary, and its inspiration comes from the combination of two words, human apothecary. And we launched Humanary in October 2021. So next month we officially turn 1 year old.
Congrats.
Thank you. We made it this far. Look, when I first started the business, I was definitely inspired primarily by solving the problem, which was the lack of access and choice for the male consumer of today to beauty and grooming products of higher quality and education and content that was advice, moving the narrative forward towards more inclusive self-care for men. And also, I also realized that on the supply side, or the brands that create these products, how much of a lack of, I suppose, again, access and data and pricing control that they lacked in being able to take their brand to market, and how difficult it was as especially as a premium but independent small brand to access that customer. And so, I was primarily inspired by solving that problem. I never had dreams of becoming a billionaire or anything like that. I still don't. I'm first and foremost driven by how do we solve that problem? And I'm very lucky that the team that we have today is also deeply passionate about it. They just want to get the best quality service out there, which makes the consumer or the customer feel very comfortable, gets them access to the right products that work for them. And similarly, on the side where we help brands, they're reaching customers today that typically they wouldn't have reached. And there are, of course, reasons for that. And that's what we're inspired by.
I must admit, I really like this as a man. And I think there are different aspects to this conversation. One of them for sure is this is a growing market. And this is something I've personally found out as an entrepreneur. Even if you have a great business idea, even if you hustle until midnight every day, if there isn't a market demand, the supply you create will go only so far. So there needs to be a demand. There needs to be an appetite in the market to purchase some things. And then we as entrepreneurs kind of fulfill that to a certain extent. This is a very basic aspect of it, but perhaps overlooked in many cases when we focus too much on innovation and value creation in a way. But I think in this case, it looks like a match because there's a growing demand I see in this area as well. So what are your thoughts on the trajectory of the growth of men looking for self-care grooming products? How has it changed in the last 5 years? And how do you think it will continue to change?
It's a fantastic question. Look, I think for a very, very long time, I'm going to get the dates wrong, so I won't mention specific dates, but for a very long time, self-care and grooming was a very important activity for men. You go back to the ancient Egyptians who used to wear makeup, males used to wear makeup, and it was considered very normal. And then, of course, the Victorian era, where there were actually very popular journals and magazines about men's grooming and how to look after yourself and how to dress and all that. But I think somewhere along the way, society started to reshape a little bit. Cultural influences were sort of more on the negative side. But then of course, more recently from 2010 onwards, I think that a lot of the definition of grooming started to change and more men started to accept it, adopt it, and it became more mainstream. Even from simple things like men wearing a moisturizer every day or wearing SPF became much more normal, and it was openly talked about. But I think the real inflection point came during the pandemic, during the extremes of the lockdown. When the world is crumbling around you and everything is so negative, and of course, so many people are suffering, the one thing that people found respite in and comfort in was self-care. They decided, hey, we've got to invest in ourselves because you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. The world can change indelibly and completely out of your control. And so when self-care became to the top of mind, more and more people started to take it seriously. It became very acceptable for men to start investing more in that sort of self-care, which started with grooming products, but also in other ways, such as seeking mental health therapy, creating a home environment that was more appealing and more comforting because that's where you spent the bulk of your time. Sexual well-being also started to get more of an open conversation platform. So all those things started to happen. And that, I think, was the inflection point that made it more and more viable for a business like Humanary, a platform like Humanary to exist. Because as you said very rightly, Ozan, we're not trying to create demand. We just have to go meet it because it's there. And it's now become more and more open. Our mission is to make it even further open, even more talked about. We want the social narrative to be about more accessibility and inclusivity. Men should not feel excluded from the beauty environments, which they traditionally have. I think what we will do is just find ways to get to those potential customers, give them that comfort, give them access to, I think, a more premium quality solution. So, what we want is, if you think about our typical customer, early to mid 20s and above in age, all across the country, in the UK and now international as well. In the past, the only choice they might have had is to go to Boots or Superdrug. And again, no disrespect to any of these retailers, but they have typically very small aisles for men's grooming products with limited choice. And so they think, oh, the best I can do is get a £3 moisturizer. And, typically these moisturizers, because the fact that they're mass scale and produced in very, very bulk volumes, cannot have the same level of active ingredients and solutions that their customers might need, because everybody's skin is different, everybody's hair is different, their bodies are different. And you need specific solutions for your own aesthetic concerns. And these kinds of stores don't have that solution. And the only way to find that, I think, in a comfortable, discrete environment is do that online, have your time to do your research, to figure out what's best for you, and then find solutions that are of higher quality and created with a very specific intent. And that's what we're trying to bring with the Humanary platform. A lot of the brands that we have are of generally smaller brands that don't produce, 5 million units of a single moisturizer in a single production line. They tends to be much smaller batch relative to the more mass market, larger brands. The stories of the brands that the entrepreneurs that create these brands tend to be very authentic stories driven by, again, mostly by personal struggle. And when it's driven by personal struggle, you find the solutions are also that much more high performance and impactful. And so that's the kind of stuff that we're trying to aggregate on our platform today. And we just have to get the message out to these customers that, look, it's okay to look after yourself, and you should not be putting rubbish on your skin every day. You should not be using rubbish in your hair. Look after yourself, invest in quality, and that'll just make you feel incredible. There's no price you can put on that feeling of feeling incredible.
Look, I'll be honest, I have never used a moisturizer, unless perhaps except the times where I got sunburnt and had particularly dry skin. I kind of ask my wife, like, can you get me a moisturizer? I feel kind of like dry in my face, like once in a while, once in a blue moon, but not regularly. But I think the more important thing here is looking back at it, maybe 5-10 years ago, if I be this person who would use moisturizer regularly, I would kind of feel a stigma and feel that I would kind of be judged. And we were having a discussion with you just before the podcast, this term of metrosexuality, etc. It kind of becomes something like, am I not manly enough because I don't use a moisturizer type of a thing? Now I think with this, I'll say the revolution around how we look at gender, that being on more like a spectrum rather than a binary, although it's a very hot debate, and I don't think as a society we've found our perfect balance on it yet, because I think we are in extremes in some areas, but I think it's a healthy direction overall. That has a lot to do with this, I feel. Do you agree? Because they completely unrelated issues, but in essence, it's about men feeling more free to make purchases and to use products without the fear of being judged and being judged less manly and less masculine in a way, I think. What do you think?
I couldn't agree more, Ozan. Thankfully, the world is moving forward in a very positive light with respect to the discussion on the meaning of gender, how that should be viewed. And actually, I would argue, and this is, of course, my personal opinion, that any man that invests in themselves through the medium of self-care and is accepting of any vulnerabilities or understands their emotions better is actually, at the end of the day, more of a formed and complete human than someone who is hiding their insecurities behind any sort of chauvinistic or toxic behavior. And I think that this is just my personal opinion, but it's also the driving force behind Humanary. It is for people to start to realize that this is okay. And yes, the truth is the stigma still exists. You don't change society overnight. It's just impossible. And unfortunately, society has conditioned many, many men over a long period of time to still think of the idea that, hey, I should wear moisturizer on my skin, or I should, invest in better hair care or body care as, quote unquote, effeminate. I completely disagree with that. I think it's not effeminate to look after yourself. I think if anything, and I don't want to use the word more manly, but it is definitely more, I should say, more complete and holistic to look after yourself. And I think a lot of people around you appreciate it. The good news is that it's actually even become more acceptable to talk about it.
It's perhaps about confidence, yeah? Like
100%. It's about your confidence. It's about feeling great. I mean, look, we're at the end of the day, Humanary is not selling the idea that you should look better. No, looking better is not the idea. The idea is to give you the opportunity to feel incredible, to feel amazing, to get that confidence boost. There's no price you can put on that, because that confidence, that underlying, removing that invisible veil of self-doubt, that's priceless, man. Like being able to operate at your best because you just feel incredible from inside. That's what we're trying to push here, because that creates better mental health outcomes. It creates better performance in whatever you desire. And it creates a more, I think, holistic and more, just a more human society, that doesn't have insecurities that create toxic environments and conflicts.
There are many elements that create a business. And in my experience, having interviewed a lot of founders, having mentored some of them, and having built a few startups myself, there's a varying mix of importance, almost a hierarchy of different domains of business. Some businesses are more finance driven. Some are more marketing driven and branding driven. Some are more community driven. Like these are not, none of them are mutually exclusive. Don't get me wrong, but seems to be a certain rank order of importance when it comes to different types of businesses. Now, I would like to focus a bit on the design and branding aspect of Humanry and how you've approached it and where it falls within that hierarchy of other things. How much of a focus do you spend as the founder of this business on design, branding, and how it looks and feels, the website and the customer experience? And perhaps a question that kind of tags along with this initial first question is, what are the things that you delegate and what are the things as a founder that you take on to do by yourself? Because I think you have a team of about 16, 18 people. Is that correct?
We're about, so we're 8 full-time people. And then we also have a few, 8 full-time, but we have another 8 or 9, freelance consultant people, that team that is actually incredibly helpful, and everyone makes a very large contribution. Ozan, this is a fantastic question, and it's a balance I'm still working on, and there's a lot that I need to get right there. The things that I deal with directly primarily are hiring and trying to build a team. That's ultimately my responsibility at the moment, because we started from scratch, right? We started from zero. It's not like you in a job, if you get promoted, you inherit a team. I'm building a team from scratch. And I think the most important thing in hiring that I found is looking for missionaries and weeding out mercenaries. I don't know if you've heard that before, but often the challenge is finding people who really truly believe in the mission and are most interested first and foremost in building and creating something that has a legacy and has value for people.
Yeah.
Because at this stage, if we were having conversations about how much cash salary someone should get paid or what kind of bonuses they should get, first of all, as a tiny startup, which started, at this point still less than a year ago, that would be financially unviable anyway. But also, it would create resentment in that employee very quickly, because in the early stages, you don't tend to have that kind of availability in cash. And I think the other thing is also, which I found quite interesting, there's a little bit of a cultural difference between a lot of my friends who are in Silicon Valley who are building companies and have told me their experience hiring employees. And what I find sometimes in London is there's a little bit of I would say probably a lack of understanding, but also perhaps a lack of exposure to the benefits of equity and shares in a company versus cash compensation.
I would 100% second this. People are
I thought it was just my experience.
Extremely risk averse. Risk averse, more the 3 S's. Safety, security, and stability are more at the top of minds rather than, okay, maybe I should take some risk and take an incredible win and let me take a punt. That seems to not be the ideology. That's something that really aligns with my exposure as well.
Right. So I found that to be the case in my personal experience. Now in 10 plus years, I found this to be fairly consistent. And of course, it's changing now a little bit, but largely people are like, well, how much are you going to pay me in cash? And my argument is often, hey, listen, even if I had, 50 million pounds in the bank and I could pay you more, I still will never be able to pay you as much cash as you really want. I mean, which job will ever do that? But why don't you take some ownership here? Why don't you build a real sense of accountability in the end outcome, and then win financially from that, as well as the satisfaction of having built something incredible with your effort and your time? And that is primarily my biggest challenge. And that's why that's my biggest responsibility today is hiring. I don't delegate that. When I have delegated it, I've found there have been some hiring mistakes. Even in the short time we've been in existence, we have made some mistakes in the alignment around culture, in the alignment around the clarity on tasks and accountability. And these are growing pains of being a small startup, but that's the number one thing I focus on. I have started to delegate more and more our product roadmap. I used to be very heavily involved in that because, well, there was no one else to do it. But we have a CTO on board full time, who's a dear friend of mine. We went to middle school together. We've known each other for many, many years, who's really now taking ownership of that and driving that. We have a growth marketing director who is also deeply involved in, understanding the customer first and foremost, and what drives them, what problems we need to solve for them, and that becomes our product roadmap. And then I think for me, the other thing I'm directly responsible for is our prioritization of where we focus our time. As you know, Ozan, there's 1,000,001 things you can be doing at any point, but which things we focus on and we get those right is crucial. And one of the things I've learned throughout my career, and this is now fortunately coming from 2 very, very successful companies, Viagogo and Just Eat, is the foundations mean everything, and you can never stop investing in your foundations. The minute you take your eyes off the foundation and you just focus on the quote unquote sexy stuff, when foundations break, your growth really takes a hit. So in our case, for example, the foundations are creating incredible content. It is about giving the new brands that we onboard a fantastic onboarding experience from day one, because that's when they form their first impression of what they're going to get from the Humanary platform. If we start to get into highly complex things for the brand and say, oh, actually, we're going to, layer in AI to give you automated insights or insights about your sales through other channels, but you take the human element away, the foundational element away, then they're not going to have as much faith in the relationship with us as compared with what we do today, which is still very simple stuff. It might feel like a grind from day to day, but that's the foundation. That's the stuff that makes the real business tick. And every business has different foundations. And we used to call this back in Just Eat, investing in the brilliant basics, doing the basics really brilliantly. And then everything else takes care of itself. You can build really tall buildings on very strong foundations.
So I think that's the thing which separates the amateurs from the pros in a way, I'll say. Your experience, although you have not yourself perhaps built many startups, because you've worked in a lot of hyperscaled companies, these mental models that you have are actually incredibly useful in guiding the focus of the business, which is get the basics right. What was it you said about just a simple?
Brilliant basics.
I think those are spot on, because people are very detail oriented in things like this, and that kind of signals if this is a business that's just trying its chance, really amateurish, or whether it feels and looks, I don't know, the experience is kind of like a professional, really high-end product. And definitely that feel comes across, like your branding, your website, your design, your experience. I think those are spot on. It really does elevate everything about the business. So very well done on that.
No, thanks, man. I really appreciate that. I mean, these kinds of words of compliment and feels very earnest coming from you also means a lot, because also one of the things that I'm sure a lot of entrepreneurs have told you is it does tend to sometimes feel lonely. At the top, you've got to be the fuel for a very long time before the brand just sort of becomes its own personality, right? I'm waiting for the day when Humanary is bigger than just what Sid started with a group of misfits. I really want it to someday become its own identity and personality beyond what just I have in mind. I'm very conscious of that too. So that's going back to your previous question, is another thing that I'm quite desperate to delegate and get some help on is that evolution of the brand, what it means, what it stands for, how it adds value to the customer, to the brand, beyond just what my understanding or my view of the world is. I want it to become its own personality and something that's much bigger than all of us combined. And that, I think, is ultimately, hopefully, where we'll get to, and will end up meaning more to a very large group of customers, hopefully in the future.
So before we end the chat, two things I would like to really get your thoughts on. For a business model like this, you really need to drive a meaningful amount of traffic, a decent volume, because even if you have a perfectly looking business and everything is well designed as a marketplace, you got the brands on there, but if it's not selling, it's not selling and it doesn't work. Yeah. So you have to get the traffic. Yeah. What do you do? What are your key actions as a business that drive the biggest amount of traffic? And what's the second one? And what's the third one? I would really love to hear them.
Yeah, sure. So obviously we do a bunch of paid marketing, which often e-commerce businesses would do on Google and Facebook and et cetera. Again, I'm going back to the type of customer that primarily finds value in our platform today, and that tends to be professional male, 24 and above, all across the country. And what they're looking for is a specific solution. So we actually create a lot of organic content to help them in solving those aesthetic concerns. So whether that's around hair loss, a lot of men really fear hair loss, do experience hair loss. So we have helpful guides and content. And actually, what's happening today is men are searching for that stuff online. So they come to us that way. Organic traffic is a very helpful source of traffic and awareness. And that's thankfully started to work really well for us. We've made a huge investment there. And I would say to any startup starting today, tomorrow, whenever, take your organic efforts extremely seriously from day one. I was probably not as serious about it on day one, and I should have been much more serious about it. Don't underestimate the power that has and the longevity in value creation that organic efforts have. And then, of course, we do above the line marketing. We've run some ads in the London Underground that have been extremely helpful for us, both from a customer acquisition perspective, but also from convincing some incredible brands. If I rewind back to October 2021, and if you'd asked me, Sid, do you think that you'd get, Augustinus Bader or Heckles or Patrick's and these kinds of incredible brands onto the platform? I would have said, no way. Like, I don't believe that. If I can get 10 brands on, I think I've done something right. But today we have nearly 100 brands on the platform, and some of them are incredible brands with amazing brands themselves, they have their own demand. So having them on the platform creates credibility, and they anchor us, and the customers trust the platform more. So doing that kind of activity also helps. And then I think the last thing is truly test and learn all sorts of content marketing, especially video today. Video is extremely important. I think that's where we have huge room for growth. We haven't cracked that yet. But thankfully, we've learned from some experiments, and we have some incredible advisors that have taught us what we should be thinking about, and we'll hopefully just get that right in the coming years.
That's amazing to hear. Did you receive any investment, any pre-seed, seed, or something further, by the way?
Yeah, we had a little bit of a pre-seed investment. We raised just slightly north of £650,000 so far. We've kept it very, very lean. I've taken this very common approach that, because I was launching new initiatives at Just Eat back in the day, where you just build quick MVP and you basically evolve from there based on the data. So that's why we didn't millions and millions of pounds in the beginning. We said, actually, we'll keep it very lean and quick. So we were gross profitable from month number 3. We wanted to be able to achieve those milestones early to understand the viability and the unit economics. And we're able to achieve that. And so now we're currently raising another round, which is bigger, hopefully north of £2 million. But the pre-seed was through our dear friends at Kaya Venture Capital. I'm a venture partner, and I've known the team for a long time, and some friends and family. So we kept it pretty quick and lean, and now we're feeling much more confident about raising a bigger round.
Sid, this was an amazing chat. Thank you for taking the time.
Likewise. Of course. Thank you so much, Ozan. Pleasure.